Hello and welcome to Meet Immersion Live. How's everybody doing tonight? I hope everybody's week is going well. I'm looking forward to Friday. I don't know about you. We have 24 more days of school. I cannot wait to get out. I'm excited for the summer to come and see what comes up with the summertime. Couple things before we get started, before we start talking with our CI story of the week. We have coming out next Saturday, a week from this Saturday, 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern. We have our $7 webinar that is called Grading Doesn't Have to Suck. So if that's something that's interesting to you, you want to learn more about strategy-based grading, proficiency-based grading, grading with CI, you can go to mm.us/strategies. I'll go ahead and put that here on the screen and in the chat. And then you can go ahead there and register. It's a $7 webinar if that's something you're interested in. It is, see, this is the 3rd, so it'll be the 10th of May, 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern. If you want to learn more about grading strategies with CI and proficiency-based and standards-based grading. So today I'm excited because we're talking with Tracey Collazos, a phenomenal language teacher who's taught everything from French to medical Spanish, and somehow still loves her job in year 25. Her CI journey started with one bold move at Burbank High, and it turned into a full-blown transformation. She's built a thriving CI program, piloted a new class, and kept students engaged across multiple levels, even when the textbook refuses to go quietly. We're diving into how she made it all work, what's still a work in progress, and the strategies that keep her classroom focused, fun, and full of acquisition. Let's jump in and speak with Tracey. Here we go. Hey, Tracey, how are you doing today?
Hi there, doing great. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I've never done a YouTube interview before, so I'm very excited.
Awesome, awesome. Has it been difficult so far?
Nope, so far so good.
Good. Awesome. So tell us something about yourself that we didn't just talk about in a little bit of an intro.
Oh my gosh. Okay, well, you did say that I love my job. It's almost sometimes surprises me every day that I still really like what I do after having done it for so long. I love to swim. I really like reading, and I sang for many, many years. So I love music, and I try and bring that into the classroom as often as possible.
Awesome, awesome. Yes, I know. I wouldn't do this job if I didn't love it every day because it's way too hard. It is way too hard. And I'll say it's the first job that I've had in all my life because I started working when I was 15 that I didn't always look for an excuse not to go in one day, calling in sick or another relative has died. I think I've had 9 or 10 grandmas who've passed away in my times because I said, oh, yeah, another grandma passed away. I need to take a couple days off, you know. Um,
Mm.
just because, but I've never done that I've been teaching for 23 years. So, or is this my 24th? I can't remember. I lose track. Either way, I've been doing it for a while and I'm with you. I love my job and I have never once looked for an excuse not to come in.
Absolutely. Originally, I thought I wanted to teach at the university level, and after having done that a bit in graduate school, I really enjoyed myself, but I didn't have the same sort of arc that you could see during the year that you get to see with students at the high school level. I found I was teaching quarter system, and so I liked working with those students. They were motivated. They used the language in our tiny little seminar classes, and that was really fun and motivating. But I took time off actually from my program, and I taught on an emergency credential. And I found that I really enjoyed watching students from start to finish in a year. And then I was even still using technology, and I hadn't started CI yet. So I fell in love with teaching high school, and I thought, okay, this is where I want to be.
Yes, yes, I'm with you there. I also started on an emergency permit. I got hired soon after 9/11. It was overflow classes. They had too many kids in classes, and so they put a sub in there. And this is a high performing high school I started at, and parents were not happy that a sub had been in there for the first, month and a half of school. And so I came in, and they didn't even warn me. My first day was back to school night, and I was like, I just made it through my first 2 days of class. I was so happy, and I get ready to go home, and they're like, where are you going? I'm like, home. It's the end of the day. You'll be back, right? I go, yeah, tomorrow. They're like, no, 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 tonight for back to school night. I'm like, what the hell is that? I never even heard of it. I didn't know what that was. And so they're like, oh, they told me. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not ready for that. It's just the first day. So yeah, I sat in and observed what other people did for their back to school nights for the first couple of periods. I only taught 2 periods that first year, and then I had fifth and sixth period, and that's when I had to do my own thing. And I was like, and she goes, just warning, because they haven't had a teacher for the past month and a half, they're going to have everybody there, moms, dads, grandparents, aunts and uncles, because we get a good turnout at this school, but because they hadn't had a teacher, everybody's going to show up. I'm like, oh, thanks for that. Yeah. And thanks for telling me
Yikes.
at the end of the school day, so I could,
It
prepare
is
for it all day.
Yeah, it's amazing what when you start on an emergency credential, it's amazing the types of experiences you have. The assistant principal walked me into the classroom. They had subs, I think, for about 8 weeks. It was a French class. This was French 3. And she excused the sub. She said, "You may go. We have a new long term sub. This person is now going to be their new teacher." She said, "Class, this is your new teacher." And she said, "Have a good day." And she left. Oh, and she said, "Oh, and on we're walking towards the classroom." And she said, "So just so you know, they're a little squirrely. Yesterday they threw a chair out the window." And I said, "Oh, okay." This was a gifted magnet, and they had 2 hour block scheduling. And so I thought, oh my, alrighty. So anyway, the students are kind of looking at me like, who's this lady? What's going on? I thought, what am I going to do? Like, how do I grab their attention? So I looked all of them in the eye, and they were a French 3 class. I figured, okay, they're probably used to hearing French because their previous teacher I had been told was wonderful. So I just went ahead and started speaking French and, introducing myself and saying hello. And they all kind of looked like they were taking off in a plane. They went like this, and then all of them went whoop like that. And I was like, oh yeah, I've got him. Good. And then I started asking them about themselves. And the next day when I came back, one of them said, "Wait, you're back?" I said, "Yeah, I had the best time yesterday. You all are so much fun." And I think that was shocking. And I loved it. I stayed there for almost 2 years before I went back to my graduate program.
That's awesome. I remember one of my students told me, Bevan Young, I still remember his name. He told me that he goes, as I had him for a couple of years, and at the end before he graduated, he's like, Profe, that first day you look like a scared rabbit. I'm like,
So funny.
I go, that's probably how I felt too, because I tell you, I was terrified. I was terrified. Hadn't worked with kids and before. It was just a whole scary experience that day. And you're right. You don't know what you don't know on an emergency permit. I didn't have any teaching credentials, anything, no teaching classes, nothing. All I had done was that introduction where you have to observe a class for so many hours before you can go into apply in. That's all I had done. And so I was completely, yeah, it was
Wow.
a rough year that year. That's the year I also found CI though. I found that my second semester.
Right
So I've been
away.
teaching
Oh
with
my gosh.
CI ever since my second semester of my first year of teaching. Because otherwise I sucked. I would not have been here to still. I could not teach out of a textbook. I bored myself to death. I really did.
Yeah, I definitely love grammar, which is so funny because I know that it bores half the world, um, but being able to teach it through a CI lens is so much better because you're not teaching grammar. You're teaching how to acquire, not how, I guess you're teaching so that students acquire, which is so much more fun than
Yeah,
explaining how things work. That's really boring.
exactly. I always
Yeah.
equate it to being able to repair and build a car to driving a car.
Yes.
And they're totally two different things, though they are related, but they're not so related that you have to know one to be able to do the other. So you can learn all about the grammar and the vocabulary of a language and never actually drive that language, actually use it. And vice versa. You can actually use that language and never know anything how to build that language. Because, it's funny, I did an interview, and I always tell this story, and it sounds really sarcastic when I say it, but in real life, it wasn't as sarcastic as I'm going to tell it. But it was an interview with a teacher, with a principal, and she asked me, so how do you teach grammar in your class? And I'm like, I don't. And she's like, what? How is that possible? So then I asked her, well, what did you teach before you became a principal? Hoping she didn't say science or math or anything. She goes, English. I'm like, awesome. You're falling right in my trap. So I said, did you teach English literature or English language and composition? She goes, language and composition. I got my degree in English grammar. I'm like, oh, you're falling right into my trap. So I said, could you please conjugate for me in the pluscuamperfect the verb to be, the most common verb in the English language? And she looked at me and she says, I don't get what you're asking me. I said, can you please conjugate for me in the pluscuamperfect, which is also known as the past perfect tense of the verb to be, the most common verb in the English language? She goes, I still don't get it. I'm like, can you give me the I, the he, the she, the you form, all five forms? Can you give them to me in the pluscuamperfect, the past perfect of the verb? She goes, I don't get it. I go, I'm not here to insult you, but you speak English beautifully. I don't hear any errors when you speak. You got a master's in English grammar, but you can't conjugate the pluscuamperfect, which is a very common verb tense in English,
Right.
in the most common verb in English that we have. And she goes, you're right, I can't. I said, okay, let me do it for you. I have been, you had been, he or she had been, we had been, they had been. And she goes, oh, I said, now you couldn't do it. You couldn't dissect that apart and give it to me, but you could use it in a sentence without any problems. And she goes, you're right. And she crossed that question off of her question list. She goes, I will not ask that question again, because
Okay.
she realized that you don't need to know what it's all called.
Mm.
And I don't even remember ever conjugating in English. I don't think we ever did that. I don't think that's a skill that we learn in English to
No,
do that.
no.
And I even had a teacher, well, not a teacher friend, who taught Spanish, and she's like, she goes, I don't know what this book is asking me to teach. It says teach these ARERIR verbs. She goes, what the heck is an ARERIR verb? I don't know what that is. And she goes, it's my native language. And I say, haven't you noticed that, like, 75% of all the verbs end in AR, and probably another 20 or so percent end in ER, and the last like 5 to 7% end in IR? She goes, well, now that you mention it, I just noticed it now. I go,
Mm.
that's what they're talking about. She goes, that's so strange. We didn't learn it that way when we were kids in school. And so I think when we go to school to learn how to teach languages, we as humans naturally know how to teach languages. Parents do it all the time without any training and get their kids to be fluent. But then we go into school and they teach that out of us and try to teach it in such an artificial way that nobody can learn it from that way.
Agreed. Yeah, our so my school, I should say, we have to do a bit of a hybrid. Um, and so I do have direct teach days, and I try and limit them to once we've already had so much language exposure, that it's just reinforcement rather than the initial exposure to whatever we're doing. So I'll just say, well, you know what this sounds like. Now you know what it looks like. Uh, but they'll be like, we already know what it looks like. I'm like, I know you already know what it looks like. Just go with me on this one. Like, we're just going to do a direct teach today. It's going to be great.
And I tell them
Um,
it's this. I tell them when I do that, I go, it's the how you did the magic trick. I'm
oh,
revealing how you did the magic trick.
I like that. May I use that?
You may.
Okay. I do tell them that Spanish is magical because the endings tell you so much
Hmm.
about who was doing it and when it happened. And that's so cool because, we don't have all of that in English. So
No,
they
and
get
I
math things.
I speak German and a little bit of French, and I go,
Oh,
Spanish is so unique because we don't need subjects in Spanish because the verb ending tells us who and when it's done.
mm-hmm.
And because in French, the words are all spelled differently, but they all sound the same. I don't know why you bother with the alphabet. Um, and German, some of them are the same because German's very phonetic like Spanish, but some of the endings are the same like English. So we need to have the subject so you can hear the difference between the you formal do it versus we do it or they do it because those are all the three. They all three have the same verb endings. So Spanish doesn't have that problem because the endings don't repeat most of the time. And only
Mm-hmm.
when they do repeat do you put the subject in. But you can't get away with that in French, English, or German because we wouldn't know. The ending doesn't give away that much information, at least orally for French. Written, you can see the differences, but speaking wise, it's je parle, tu parles, il parle, that's all the same. Well, they're spelled differently, you can't hear them. So the kids, like say, we've got those endings that really tell us a lot in Spanish and not so much in English or in the other language. So I can compare and contrast sometimes and show them.
That's super fun. I love that. I actually really enjoy that about teaching both Spanish and French because everyone always asks me, which one's harder? I'm like, neither one. Come on now.
Yeah,
They both have their challenges, but if you want to learn both of them, learn both of them. That's just the way it is.
yeah.
Um, yeah.
That's what I did in high school. I took Spanish in 10th grade, and then Spanish and German in 11th grade, and then Spanish, German, and French in 12th grade.
Oh,
And
that's
I
so
took
fun.
and I took French up through Intro to French Literature in college, but then I got a letter from the college saying I hadn't taken any of my basic classes, my math, English, science, social studies classes, and that if I didn't get them done by X date, they were going to suspend me
Oh,
because I go, but the language classes only come once every 5 or 6 years. You got to take them when they come because it's not like they teach, the upper level Spanish classes. Because that was my major at the time, even though I ended up with a German major. But they don't teach those higher level classes every year. You got to get them when you can if you want to graduate in 4 years.
mhm.
Otherwise you're waiting around for classes. So I said English is taught every semester, so I don't have a problem finding an English class, but I do have a problem finding Spanish or a German class that I need to fill the degree out. So yeah, so had to drop French at that point. So my French is really, really, really rusty. But I can get by in France when I'm there. They don't insult me by speaking English, which I like.
Well, see, that's the important part.
Yeah.
It's funny that it sounds like we had a little bit of the same. When I was doing my undergraduate degree, I just had so much fun, like adding all the different language classes whenever I could. So I did some Italian, and then in one of my Spanish classes, the professor was teaching a Catalan class, and she needed more students. And she says, "Hey, do you want to come to my Catalan class?" And I decided, well, if I'm going to invite you to a class, you should probably go. So I went, and I remember thinking the class was like 2 hours long. I don't know. By the time I got out of there, my brain felt like it was huge. In the class had been in Catalan the entire time. And I was walking back to my dorm room, and I thought, oh my gosh, that whole class was in Catalan. And I actually think I understood about 90% of it. And it was so exciting to me that you could be in a language that you had never heard before, and that your brain would kind of find those pathways from French, Spanish, and Italian and mesh them together to try and help you out with Catalan. I thought it was amazing. So that was really cool. And I ended up staying in the class just to hang out. But yeah, my Catalan is very basic, very rusty, and you don't get beyond answering the phone and, good morning. But I had a lot of fun.
I know, isn't it? The more language you learn, your brain makes these connections. Like I'm
Mhm.
always telling the kids about the connection where this word comes from and where that word comes from, because I have that from studying all the languages. I see where the words come from, and sometimes it's like I've been teaching for 23 years and I never noticed that connection, but I noticed it today, so I'll be using it from now on and talking to the kids about it. Like the other day, I always teach. We're in Spanish 2 and my Spanish 3. We read a book and it has culpa in it, fault, whose fault it is. And I'm like, in this word, English, we get culpable in Spanish is culpable. We get that word from it. And you get, there's a couple other words I go, and then all of a sudden it dawned on me, and I've been teaching this book for like 6 years. I go, we also get culprit from this. And I didn't think about culprit till just the other day. Someone who's
Oh, as in the
guilty
guilty
of
party.
something. There is a
Yes.
culprit. And so it's
Mhm.
another one of those little things. They're like, how do you know? I was like, it's just experience as I live the language. You feel the patterns, you start to live the language, you breathe the language. I can now sometimes figure out if I've never seen a verb in Spanish before, I can tell you with pretty good certainty whether it's a stem changer or not.
Mhm.
I get a feeling for it. Now, years ago, I found a rule book where it tells you which verbs are stem changers by rules. There's a rule something, but I've
Yeah.
never been able to find that rule again. But I did have it at one time. There is a rule that tells you whether the verb is going to be a stem changer or not. I don't remember what that rule was. I don't remember it. I remember something to do with syllables and the stress, where the stress is in the word. But other than that, I don't remember. And I can't find that rule anywhere. But I do have like a sixth sense where if I've never seen a verb before, I can sense whether it is going to be a stem change or not. And that's because, as you absorb the language, you live the language, it
Yeah.
sinks in, and your brain starts to either make patterns that aren't there, which everybody does, like adding ed to everything to make past tense until you
Right.
know better,
Yeah.
or
Yep.
it actually guesses it right and makes the patterns the way they're supposed to be. And either way, our brain is constantly remapping. I keep telling them, your brain with languages is a constant Google Maps. And every time they reroute the road, they have to readjust the Google map to adjust to it. And your brain is doing that.
Oh,
Every time you get that little new piece of information about language, your brain is constantly rewriting the instructions in the brain and how the language works until you become completely fluent, and then you can do it all by yourself. But your brain does that, and that's why some kids will ask the same question, or like I answered that question yesterday for kid A, and then today I answered the question for kid B, and 3 weeks from now kid C asked the exact same question because he wasn't ready to understand it yet. His brain had not gotten to that point in the map building process. And I learned that from Bill Van Patten. He's a very inspirational guy, and he's really good where Krashen explains things so much in technical terms. um, Bill Van Patten can put it in regular everyday English to where you can understand it a little bit better. So I really like the way he's doing that. Well,
yeah,
let's
he
get
has
back.
the tea with BVP, right? Is he still
Yep,
doing tea
BVB.
with
Yep,
BVP? Yeah,
yep,
okay,
yep,
nice.
that's the one.
Mhm.
That's the one.
Yeah.
um so how long have you been teaching with CI? When did you said in your 25 years, but when I read your bio, I didn't say exactly how many years ago you have been.
Yeah, so I think we started piloting the program, I want to say in 2016. Um, I had a colleague come to me and say, I am not having success with this sort of direct teaching grammar, and I really want to try CI, and I need a buddy. And, um, I think we would be a great team. And I really didn't know anything at that point in time. But I'm always open to trying new things because anything that's going to improve things for my students is going to improve my life. And so she was super excited about this. And so she's like, here, you can, look at these materials. We can do a conference together. I really want to try and get this going. And the district of Burbank Unified, the assistant superintendent supported us and was willing to allow us to go to conferences. And we went to observe Alina Filippescu.
Oh yes.
So she changed my life. That was so cool. We got to go watch her, and as teachers, I feel like I want to be in other people's rooms all the time.
Yep.
Like we learn so much from each other. A little trick here, a little something there. I feel like we have so much to teach each other, and we don't get the time always to be able to go and observe one another. And then I know there are some teachers who don't feel comfortable having someone else in their room. But I love it when you can foster, a sense of warmth and support and excitement for what other people are doing. And it doesn't even have to be something special, right? Just the left can teach us so much. And I really feel like that 25 years in, I'm still learning things from other people. And that's part of what I think makes the profession so exciting. So anyway, back to the whole CI beginnings. We took TPRS storytelling with Blaine Ray. He was the one giving the conference. It was a 3 day. And again, I just had that sort of like, feeling where I was up to here and here with all of the wonderful things that were happening while he was teaching that conference that happened to be in German. And we did do a writing afterwards, and we counted our words and we looked at word count for writing and connection of ideas. And it was a retell after he had told the story and trained us a bit and given us the background on, how it works and why. And I was sold. From that point on, not only did I have a really good time, but the learning through repetition and exposure and storytelling was something that was completely new to me, and I absolutely loved it, and it just clicked. And so from there, working in actions for students to give them a more concrete idea of what was to attach to. I call them sound bites, but because I feel like I'm teaching sound bites of language to students because we learn right through audio. So we work on whichever soundbite we're incorporating for the day, which would be our target structures, right? Whatever the target structures are. But anyway, so we went to that, and then we saw Alina Filipescu teach. I did some coach conferences, and I think learning how to do this type of teaching for anyone who's just starting, it was one of the hardest things I think I've ever done. I think you have to be kind to yourself, right? Not every day is going to be your most amazing day, but I really do feel that when people say if you're in the language and accessible to students, you're in those comprehensible moments where you're pausing and pointing, where you're asking questions, where you're recycling information in new ways so that students can grab on and acquire and be part of the fun and be part of the process. I think all of those things are so valuable that you just have to give yourself a little bit of grace in not having to be perfect at anything, and your students don't have to be perfect at anything. And I really loved letting go of having to worry about every ending, when you're grading, and instead looking at sort of the journey and the spectrum and being able to see, oh, this student has gone from this to this, oh, we're looking at, now they're creating more with what let's see, what did I see students do? Oh, connections, right? So usually when they start out, they're writing or speaking in one words or snippets of thoughts and ideas. And then as they learn how to build a story, or rather acquire more language, you see more of those things come through in their writing. You hear more of it come through in their speaking. And I have to say, there was one moment with my level twos a couple of years ago when a student wanted to tell me something, and he started talking, wanted to tell me about how something had been and then what happened that last weekend. And I don't even remember what the story was, but he started, and he was like, yeah, yo estaba leyendo y de repente, había una persona, hubo una persona, and all of it just sort of fell out of his mouth. And it was so funny because when he got done with the story, he went, and there was that face, right, of just like, wait, did that just happen? He goes, did that I said, yeah, that all just came out of your mouth. That was really amazing. But the cool thing was is that he realized for himself just how much he had acquired and how much he was able to speak intentionally in a way that was really meaningful to him. And so that I will forever remember
Yeah.
that. I was like, wow.
And you mentioned two things. One, the observations, and I 100% agree with you. I learn something new from another teacher, from another adult, or from one of my students every single day. And observing teachers is so important. You learn so much. When I was back in teaching school, when we had to do it, they really didn't explain what you should be looking for or anything like that. So you just sat there like bored, like not knowing exactly what to do. But now that I have a focus, it's a much different experience where I'm watching it and observing. And something we did at my old school, we don't do it so much in my school, partly because I'm on an off campus. I'm at the Career and Technical Academy part of the campus, which is
Mhm.
separate. It's 15 minutes away from the main campus. So I'm the only language teacher that's there. Um, Anyway, so at my old school, as a department of 7 teachers, we agreed during our preps that we would give up 15 minutes of a prep period twice a month to go around and observe another one of our teachers. We agreed to that as a team. Admin had nothing to do with it, and nothing that we observed got back to admin unless the person who was being observed decided to share it with the admin. The
Okay.
admin was aware that we were doing it, but we also told them, you can't use us to gather information. That's not what we're doing. It's for our own benefit. And we had a little form that everybody filled out, and it was only positive. There, nothing negative could be put on that form. So we asked how much of the class was in the target language, what percentage of the class, what did the teacher do to make the language comprehensible, what did the teacher do to make the kids comfortable in class? Those are the only 3 questions. And then you had a spot for you to put other notes on there that you want to do, but only positive. Nothing negative could be there. You couldn't point out, oh, I saw kid number 4 over here, not, playing on the self, nothing like that. It was just all positive. And then I learned so much from that. And we learned so much from that, from making that commitment. So we got to observe in 10 months of school, we got to observe 20 different times. And although we were only required 15 minutes, most of us stayed for the whole time because it's really hard to observe for 15 minutes. You want to see how it began, how it
Yep.
went the middle, and how it ended up for at least that class period. And our class periods were about 45 minutes long, so we gave up that time, but it was valuable to us. We all learned stuff from that, and it's so valuable to be able to do that. And if you can't get into other teachers' classrooms within your district or within your school, Alina puts videos up about herself. La Maestra Loca puts videos up herself. There's lots of teachers who put up videos of themselves teaching that you can go in and observe through YouTube or some other way to be able to get that, because I think it's so, so very valuable. And the other thing you mentioned was about those endings. And it's funny because my German is rusty, even though that's what my major is. I've never been able to teach it. And the last time I had a German class was like in 2001. So it's been a long time. Um, and I was always hesitant to do my demos when I taught TPRS to other people. I did it for Blaine for many, many years. To use German as my language. I stuck to a story. I had a script like Blaine does, because Blaine doesn't speak German. He memorized the script, and he
Right.
doesn't know anything about language, the German language. He just memorized the script. Well, that's kind of what I did. But then it wasn't fun for me, and it wasn't fun for the people, because the whole point is to get that interaction between. So the worst thing that can happen to me in a demo is having a German teacher in the room, for 2 reasons. One, they're going to correct my German. And two, they're not going to get the same feeling that a French, a Spanish, or a Mandarin teacher is going to get,
Right.
because they understand the language. And that's
Yep.
why I never do it in Spanish or French, because those are two common languages. If you speak French, you can kind of pick up the Spanish and vice versa. So, and you don't get that many Mandarin or Japanese teachers in the room. It's mostly Spanish and French. So German really was what? So I do this one in upstate New York, and I have this German teacher in there, and I'm like, oh God, this is not good, gonna be good, because she's not gonna get the benefit. So I start going, and she did something amazing. And so after this, I always tell the German teachers that are in the room, don't listen to the language. That's not your here. I want you to watch what I do and make notes of what I do. And so I didn't tell her that. She told me that's what she did, and she pointed out some things, and she was amazed by certain things, and that really helped her. And what she said to me was, she goes, "Oh my gosh, the things that you covered in this 45-minute story that we did, I would not have covered in a whole year of level 1. I just would not have, because the grammar gets really complicated in German. We don't have just genders, we have 3 genders, but you also have cases. So the endings change, whether it's a subject, a subject, um, a direct object, indirect object, or in the genitive case, possession. So you have all these different things. Because you're throwing this in there. You're throwing in relative clauses where the verb goes to the end. Think Shakespeare at the end of the sentence. And you're doing all of this, and you did this in 45 minutes to basically the first class period of German 1. And she goes, that was amazing enough. But then when they could use those things back after 45 minutes of teaching was mind blowing.
Yeah.
She goes, you use these cases, and not all of them got the endings right, but a lot of them got the endings right. And I always believe in teaching the big numbers before the small numbers, because what do big numbers have? They all have the small numbers in there, but small numbers don't have the big numbers. And you only need about 40 numbers to be able to count to infinity in any languages. They just keep repeating over and over and over again. So I was teaching like how many, whatever we had, whatever animal it was we had something like 1486 of them. And she goes, they got that number down. They were able to do that number. And it's a really long number in German. In German, all the numbers are written as one word. So, it's a long word. It's like 30 some letters.
Oh my
It's
gosh. I
all
didn't know.
written in one word. So,
Wow.
they were getting those in there, and then you put years in there, and then you have to say the year all in 1999, but German does it backwards. 1900 and how do we do it? And 9 and 90 is how they do it.
Oh,
They do it backwards. We used to do that way in English too. 4 and 20 blackbird baked in a pie. We used to
that's
do
how
it back
French
then.
does it. Yeah,
So,
4 and
yeah.
20, right? Yeah. Hmm.
And French, you have to do math to be able to do count in French, which boggles my mind.
Unless you're from Belgium, in which case you can use septante, huitante, and nonante.
Oh, I didn't know
Um,
that.
oh yeah, but I have tried that when making reservations for planes because I used to work for a company and I need to make reservations for the person, and I tried it with a French airline and they were like, no. It was so funny. She said, I think what you meant is 80. And I said, no, no, I meant 80. And she said, no, no, I think what you meant is 80. And I was like, okay, fine, 80, whatever you want. Um, but yeah, it was pretty cute. So whoever I was talking to was very excited about using, 80 and not 80.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's funny. But yeah, I always remember the French had to figure out how to, you know, 4 times 20 to figure. Can't we just make up a name for it? Why do we have to do math to figure it out? But every language, like you said, has its little quirks that does
Mm-hmm.
things. In German, they put the ones before the tens, which is what we did in English way back when we just turned it around. But it is what it is. So it's been 2016.
Yes, that sounds about right. So we piloted for 2 years and then I just dove right in. I had committed to being sort of a 50-50 for our first year and then a 75-25 for our second year, mostly because I just wanted to make sure that the parts I was using I was successful at before I dove in completely. Um, but I felt like my students were doing so well with acquisition and were feeling so good about themselves that I owed it to them to really up my game, as much as I could, as fast as I could. Yeah, and it's been great.
Blaine always says, he says, bad TPRS is better than great textbook. They acquire more from that bad TPRS than they do from great textbook, because textbook gives you the nouns and the vocab, and then it gives you the grammar, but it rarely links them together in any meaningful way. So kids might know all the grammar rules and kids might know all the vocabulary and could recite all those grammar rules and recite all that vocabulary and know that, but they can't put them together into sentences that are actually living and breathing. And so that's the difference, I think, there. And he always said that. And he also said, and I don't think he was the original sayer of this, but he's the one that I think of when it says it. But he says, anything worth doing is worth doing poorly at first.
Oh, that's interesting.
Because whatever we do, we want to learn, we always start badly. No one starts doing it perfectly. Whether you're singing like you were talking about earlier, or playing a musical instrument, or playing a sport, we all sucked in the beginning.
Yeah.
but it's worth it to us because we're interested in it to keep working at it to get better at it. And that's the way with CI. And that's kind of why I've done these interviews, is because this comes up in a lot of our conversations that I saw Blaine do it. I saw La Maestra Loca do it. I've seen, so and so do it, and so do it. And I look at them, I go, it's awesome what they're doing, but I'm not like them, and I can't do it the way that they do it. So then they don't do it at all. We all need to find our own way. And I wanted everybody to see that everyday teachers are doing this. You don't have to be a Blaine. You don't have to be a La Maestra Loca. You don't have to be a Tina Hargadin. You just can be yourself and still do it. And that's kind of why I brought these in here, because I think it's an important part. Because when we do watch those YouTube videos or we go to conferences or workshops, it's always these superstars, and then you don't see the results of how many of those people actually go back to their classrooms and do it, and how many continue to do it afterwards, etc. So I wanted to tell these stories of everyday teachers who are doing it every single day, and there's nothing special about us. We're just teachers who go in every day and teach our kids the best way we know how.
One of the people that was recommended to me, so I had seen the superstars you were talking about, and was doing my best to emulate, I could. And I was also finding that because it was taking, I call it mental acrobatics. I feel like because there's so much engagement that goes on between teacher and student, and because and student to student, because you're constantly adjusting, right? You're keeping the information that the students are giving you in your head or on your, flow chart or whatever, so that you can refer back to it and make your classroom a meaningful place for them to be. Um, I was also I tend to be a fairly energetic teacher, and so I was just coming home just flat, like whoa, totally exhausted. And I have children, and I have, as we all do, other
Yeah.
responsibilities of some sort, right? So I was like, oh my gosh, how am I going to find? I needed to dig deep and figure out, like, can I continue doing this at this level in this way? And someone recommended that, I think is it Michelle Whalen or Whaley? Is that
Whaley, Michelle Whaley.
Thank you. So Michelle Whaley, if I remember correctly, has she has a calmer approach
Yes, she
to
does.
her teaching, right? A softer voice, a calmer approach. And someone said, watch her, because she is just as engaging and just as effective as some of the people that you see that have a higher energy level. Or that present themselves in a different way. And that helped a lot, because I felt like, okay, on days when I need a minute, or on days when I'm not firing on all cylinders, or that second cup of coffee just didn't do it, it's okay to not be um, continuously energetic, continuously on top of things, continuously like, because um, a lot of the people I had observed were that. They were, and it was wonderful, right? It was wonderful. They were highly engaging and very intense, and big faces, big gestures, all of themselves thrown into the engagement and the acting and everything else. And so watching Michelle Whaley was helpful, because I thought, okay, even if I have what for me I would almost consider a bad day, where I just don't have the same amount of energy I normally do, I see this person who is calm and still very engaging and very effective. And so I'm going to follow that on days when I don't have as much of me energy wise to give. And it was super helpful. So I would recommend watching Michelle Whaley if either you have a personality where you tend to be a little bit softer spoken, or you tend to not be, an actor by nature, because she's amazing and she does an
She is.
amazing job.
And I
Yeah.
put up another one who Hyun Lu teaches Mandarin in Milwaukee. She's another calm, quiet teacher, very wonderful soul of a person. So both those are good ones to watch if you want that calmer way to see things, how it's done, because who you got to find is your own personality and how to apply it with your own personality. I am an introvert. I am extremely introverted. After I'm done with the school day, I don't want to speak to another human being at all. I want to cuddle up in a corner because it takes all my energy to get it out during the school day to put on that persona and be on that whole time. Because when they talk about prison, say solitary confinement, I'm like, that's a negative? Because not for me, it's not. I can run. When I was a kid, I could always entertain myself. I didn't always have to have a friend next to me. Like my sister was always on the go, always had to have friends, and she got bored really easily. Well, I'm like, I can, my friends aren't available today. I can go and do something else, and I could completely entertain myself. So, like you said, I'm very exhausted at the end of the day because of that partly. And two things that came to mind when you were talking about that. One is I said to myself years ago, do I want to put my energy in 110% while the kids are in front of me? Or do I want to give 50% of my energy to the kids and then 50% after school ends and spend grading all those papers that they turned in? And I'm like, well, I don't get paid after that bell rings. So I would rather put my time in when the bell. So that's what I did. So that helped me get through that because other teachers were staying an hour or 2 hours after school grading papers. And I'm like, I'm not doing that. So I didn't do that. But then something I started doing this semester, not even last semester, I had this major, because I came back to high school, I had this major problem in my first semester classes. The last time I taught high school was pre-COVID, and the kids are all different post-COVID. Even in middle school, they were different. And
Yeah.
so things that I had done for many years, even in middle school, was not working in high school. And the first semester, I was like, I got to go back to middle school. I can't do this. This is just too hard. They just weren't jiving what I needed to do. And I was fighting over stupid stuff like, put your damn cell phone away for a minute. Can you pay attention for 5 dang minutes? And we had school rules about them and all these other kinds of things. And these kids were blatant. They didn't care if I told them to put it away, they would have it there. Or they'd have both earbuds in. I say, take your earbuds out. They take out one. And I say, take out the other one. They take out that one and put the other one back in. That's how they were. And they weren't really trying to be like horrendously mean. They were just, that's the way that they were. They couldn't live without their cell phones. So I tried something new this time. And it's not only helped them, but it helped me mentally and physically. So I've always done class points. I've always done that class points, and they use that to buy a privilege, when they save up enough points like skee ball. But what I changed about this time was all the positive points that I give the class for that day turn into free minutes at the end of the class period. So I'm on a block, so I teach for 90 minutes each class. So my limit is 15 minutes. So even if you got 20 points, the max free time you can get is 15 minutes. If I were still teaching in my middle school where we only had 45 minutes, then the max free time would have been 5 minutes. So you have to adjust for your time. But what I did was I said, if I see a cell phone, you're not going to get those points. They're going to get taken away. So they knew that no matter how many good points they got was free time at the end, and most of it used it for phone time so they can check up on their messages, check. So they knew they had that time at the end of the class. So guess what was happening? They weren't fighting with me during class to do that. Yes, I was giving up to, but it's 15 minutes, but the average, I'll be honest, is 10 minutes, and you totally can rig the game. If I know I have a little bit more material to cover today and I only want to give them 5 minutes, I'm just more judicial about giving them their points. I don't give them as many points as I would have, or I start deducting some points for stupid stuff I wouldn't deduct points from. So it works out in there, but it's averaging about 10 to 12 minutes. Rarely do we get the full 15 minutes. But here's the twofold problem. The solution, the good thing about it. One is they got their phone time at the end of class. So they know that's coming, and so they're less likely to pull it out in class because they know they're getting that. And two, that is downtime for me to reset before the next class.
Yeah.
So I never done that. I've always taught bell to bell to bell, always. In 22 and a half of my years, that's what I've done. But this 10 to 15 minutes at the end of class has been wonderful, not only because I'm older and I need a little bit more of a time to reset, but when I do go from one level to a completely different level, I'm not just repeating. I got to reset my board, I've got to reset my slides, all that stuff. It gives me that time because the passing period's not enough time. I got to go pee too. So, there's just not enough time to all that to do. So I found giving that time benefits both them and me. It gives them a few minutes of reset too. And if they have to catch up on classwork, my work, or some other classwork, they're free to do that as well. So whatever they want to use the time, they just can't go outside the classroom and they can't line up at the door. Those are the two things that I have on there. But if you want to use your phones, go ahead and use your phones as long as we don't hear them. So it's really worked out really, really well doing something like that. And it adds to your thing about being exhausted. I'm less exhausted because I'm
Yeah.
getting that 5 to 10 minute break. And it's not like I'm not doing anything. I'm resetting myself, or I got to make an adjustment. I noticed there's something that didn't go really well with this lesson today, and I got to do that class again in a couple of hours. So let me just go ahead and make that adjustment right here. I can catch
Mhm.
up on my emails, whatever it is, but it's downtime where I don't have to be on at that moment. And so I really appreciate that, and something I'm going to continue. It's worked really, really well. Who knows if it'll work well next semester? We'll try. It's a new set of kids, but it's worked really well at this time that I'm willing to try it again.
Yeah, that idea of figuring out where you can work downtime into the period, I think is really important, whether it's at the end, in the middle. And it's funny, I feel you. You get to year 23, year 25, and your biorhythms are a little bit different. You got
Yeah.
to figure yourself out and make sure that you're still being the positive person you want to be in the classroom. And you have to figure out how to make that work.
Yeah.
I used to give a break in the middle of the period, just a 3 minute, and they could do whatever they needed to do in that 3 minutes. Um, we read. If you're just starting with CI and you can figure out how to get a classroom library going, that is an amazing way to not only help your students but help yourself.
Yep.
We twice a week right now, sometimes more, for anywhere from 5 to 12 minutes. With my upper levels, it tends to be 10 to 15, and with my lower levels, it's whatever we can manage based on their energy for the day. Um, and I know that a lot of people just read for pleasure, and it's completely free reading. Um, I alternate between having some responses they can do, but I let them do them in any order. And sometimes, if they've read a book from someone else has read, they get to trade things. Like, I made this drawing. What do you think of it? That kind of thing. So they either draw about what they read, or they can journal about what they read. Um, or sometimes we just read and I go, okay, we're not doing any response today. We just enjoyed our reading, and great. Which is interesting because when I don't have them respond, they go, yay. And I go, okay,
Yeah.
good. So we enjoyed our reading. Excellent.
Yeah. I do
Uh,
reading every day with you. Like, I'm a big proponent of that. And since I have that hour and a half, we do it every single day. It's our warm up. They know they come in. The first thing they come in, they go get their book. They sit down. They start reading.
it's magic. It is magic to have that moment.
And it starts the class calm.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I
Yep.
like.
And you find, yeah. Have you ever done, so the other thing, I don't know if anybody needs sort of data for sharing with their department, with their admin. I have putting out, what have you read this week? What are you enjoying about reading? How do you feel like it's helping you acquire Spanish? Is a really neat set of data to have. And also, those are some of the things that keep me going, because the comments that students make, if you leave them a little short answer area, a lot of times I don't always know how my students are feeling about reading, especially since it is a quiet time. And a lot of students are focused, but then you have people, who are glancing around the room, or they slumped or whatever. But trying to let them read however they feel they need to. And so that kind of gives me an idea. Sometimes the child who I thought wasn't interested says something like, I really enjoy our reading time. It allows me to start class quietly. Or I just learned, how to say I'm scared. And I didn't realize how to say that before yesterday. I'm going to try, using that in a story tomorrow or something. So those kinds of things, if you need a little bit of a good moment from your students for those tougher days when you need positive feedback. Sometimes that reading a little Google form or a little, form that they fill out telling you how they're feeling about their reading is wonderful. It's
It
wonderful to
is,
read.
and it's awesome to see when on their face when they realize they understood something.
Hmm.
That makes a big difference when they go, I understood that. And I'm like, that's awesome. That's awesome. That's the whole goal of what we're doing. So that's really great. We have a question here, so let me go ahead and put it up here. Profe Ratzlaff, and I forgive me if I've butchered your name. Do you ever have a problem with students causing problems during their free time? I'll give it to Tracey in just a moment. I'll just talk about mine. Not usually, because I'll tell them, I'll start deducting the points. And so usually I say, you've got to be in your seats. You can talk with your friends as long as it's quietly. You can be on your phones. You can do anything, but it can't disturb the class. You can't line up at the door because that's where 90% of all the problems happen if you let kids line up at the door. Um, and, if you don't if you misuse it, you lose it. And so I haven't had any problems with them. They're not pestering other students. Sometimes they'll come talk to me. They want to talk to me about something. Not about their grades, just about, Profe, I got a video I want to show you. I saw this, or I did this the other day. He goes, right now, do your kids doing some new ice bucket challenge?
Oh
There's
yeah,
yeah,
for
they're doing
sure.
the new version of the ice bucket challenge. They're showing me videos of that. So no, it's not been a negative. But if it ever happened that there's a negative, I'm like, okay, tomorrow we're gonna pause it. No free time tomorrow, and then if you guys behave, then we'll bring it back. And I'll do something like that. And I'll say one other thing about the free time. Sometimes I've gone over and I'm like, oops, I was supposed to give you 9 minutes of free time, and there's only 1 minute left. I owe you 9 minutes tomorrow. So I'll give them that. So they always get it. They don't ever go, you said you're going to give us time and you took it away and you didn't give it back. I always honor it. When I have it, I'll write a little 9 so I know that I have to give them 9 more minutes. But I've not had any problems with it. When you give your breaks, have you had any problems with your students?
No, and I haven't. I've had probably about the same. They appreciate, I think, just the time
Yeah.
that they have, and they feel that they've earned it. And so you're right. You absolutely have to honor it.
Yeah.
That is really important. Not going back on your word, not going back on what you said you will award them, making sure you follow through. Um, I did have some challenging behaviors this year. And so I have in the past, if they misbehaved, taken something away from the entire class. And this year I had to move to talking to individual students and giving them a choice. And the choice for me was, either you know, do what's expected of you here, or we're going to have you come in at a different time, not of your choosing, to work on doing what's expected of you so that you can do it better in class. And so, not as a punitive, but as an educational moment where, and they're like, oh, well, I in trouble. And I'm like, well, really what we need from you is just not happening. And I feel like maybe if you and I work on it a little bit, I try really hard to stay away from punitive things. And usually what I'll say is you're losing class time. You're losing time to learn. And I really want to make sure that you're acquiring everything that you can, because you want to be able to say what you want to say. And so trying to go at it from that angle, if you do have one outlier that just really isn't getting on board, seeing if you can spend a little bit of extra time, uh, during lunch, during nutrition, starting out with just 5 minutes and maybe seeing sometimes 5 minutes is all they need to kind of get back on track the next day. Sometimes they need longer. Depends.
Yeah, it's true. I have one coming tomorrow. I have two kids that won't sit in their seats. And normally I'm a you can sit wherever you want kind of person, sit however you want as long as you're paying attention, but their grades aren't showing they're paying attention.
Yeah.
So I bring it, it's not punitive. I'm like, class, they need help. They need help to keep stay in their seats. They need reminders, and not just from me. So let's help as a team, as a community. Tomorrow, we're going to help keep these two boys in their seats so they can really be the best that they can be in Spanish class. I said, and if we all work as a team in a positive way, we're not going to be bashing them. That's not what we're doing. Then I'll give you 5 extra bonus points. in the class. And so then it's bringing us together for us all as a community, because it takes a village to get
Yeah.
everybody on there, because lots of times they want to goof off because they show their peers that they're better and that they've got something fun to do. And this way, the peers are helping them by saying, we're not going to play that game, we're not going to be watching you or paying attention to you, we're really focusing on class. And helps as a team to build those kids up so they can do better in class. And so, like you said, not punitive. We don't, especially at my school, because they get bused between my campus and the other campus. They spend half the day in my campus and half the day at the main campus, and they swap. We can't keep them any time. They've got buses to catch and all that kind of stuff. So there's no extra time that I can keep the kids after. So I've got to, use all my time during class. But I try to make it, like you said, a positive experience and make it a team thing. So I'll talk to them individually, but it's not been working individually. And I have individual points too. They get points for doing what they're supposed to be doing. But here it wasn't working. So then I'm like, okay, let's make it a little bigger. We'll make it the village and see how that works before I have to go to any real discipline issues. And I'm not there yet. We're not even close to those discipline issues yet. But I'm trying to just get them so where they can get their grades up, because they're just not focusing enough. And it's because they're all wandering around the room. And I know why. They're undiagnosed ADHD. I get it. But in order for me to let you free, you got to show me that you can be responsible enough. So I don't care if you wander my room normally, but your grades don't indicate that you can handle wandering the room and focusing at the same time. And so that's a big one for me. So I'm with you. Positive always works best, not punitive. I instead of taking points away, I rather just not give positive points. Do it that way, or give positive points when they are doing their little thing. Like today, they sat for like 6 minutes straight. I'm like, ooh, okay, get a point, because they sat for 6 whole minutes without me saying something, and then they realize those little goals will add up. So they're not. So the class isn't like disliking them because they're losing points because of them. They're gaining points when those kids succeed, and so they're more apt to buy into that and keep it positive that way.
Yeah.
We are at the end of our time. I can't believe I looked at it a minute ago and it was like 5:15, and now I look at it now at 6:01. um so one thing you would like to leave people with, who are either trying CI, are in the trenches, or want to try, what advice would you give them, or something you'd like to
Uh,
leave them with?
I would say, first of all, you're not alone, especially when you're first getting started. I would say don't be afraid to borrow as many things as you possibly can from other people. I've learned a ton from Scott. I've done some of the immediate immersion webinars, and I definitely started with a lot of your rubrics when I first started, and I still use them. I love them. Um,
Thank you.
yeah, you're welcome. They're great. So I would say borrow as much as you can while you're trying to figure out what works for you, and don't be afraid to reach out to someone and just say, "I tried this, it didn't work," or "I tried this and this worked, but I'm not sure how to do this." And just be really patient with yourself. Your students are going to benefit from the work that you're putting in. Um, and yeah, you're going to be amazed at what they can do. Even if you just start with TPR, if you're scared, just start with total physical response, with putting some actions, into some gestures to words, and starting with that kind of thing. I start the year with Los Pollitos Dicen with my students, and a gesture to, the baby chicks say. And that actually, if you're not sure where to start, if you start with a song or with a story, um, that I think it's a great way to start. Wildebeest is also a great story to start with,
Yeah,
because
that's a good one. Yeah.
you can gesture the whole one, and it's really funny as a teacher to watch your students gesture wildebeest, and you get to do it with them. Like, I'm just, oh my gosh, that's a great day for me.
And there's a website. Look for funny, roly African animals, and all these animals are fat
Yeah,
and round, and
I
there's
love
funny
it.
little things that happen to them because they're fat and round. Like one of the cats falls out of the tree and then bounces as it goes through, and then there's a leopard or something running after a goat or an antelope or something, and they're both fat and round, and they trip and they start rolling, and they roll apart from each other. They're really funny roly. It's a YouTube channel. Let me see if I can find
Okay,
it
I'm
here.
totally gonna look
Funny
that up.
roly animals. Let me see if I can find the YouTube channel here. really quick.
That makes me
Okay,
think
yep, I found
of
it here. I'll put the link up for
okay.
it. Um, it's called Rollin' Wild. Here's the link. So youtube.com/at Rollin' Wild dash official. And they've got all these
Nice.
fat animals, and my kids love them. They're so funny.
Oh,
They're
I'm so
so
looking at that.
funny. In there. So that's it reminded me of wildebeest. That's why, and they have some ones in there with alligators and African animals and stuff like that. So it's just a funny one to get. So I'm always looking for new ones. So this is a good one in there. But that is
That's
great
neat.
advice. Find what they always say. Steal whatever you can steal
Yeah.
because that's good teaching. You learn stuff and then you can adapt it to whatever you want to adapt it to, however you want to make it your own. That's fine, and that's what we need to do, is share more as teachers, because our job is hard enough to reinvent the wheel every day. So what we can share with each other really does make a big difference. Is there a social media link you'd like to share with us, where they can get in touch with you? Do you have
Oh, can I give my email? Would that be
whatever you'd
okay?
like? Yep.
Okay. Yeah. No, I'm Tracey Collazos at Gmail.
Okay, Tracey Collazos at gmail.com. We'll put that up there. So if any of you would like to get in contact with her, if you have any questions and you're watching this on the replay after the fact, please put them in the comment section and I'll make sure that Tracey gets them so she can answer them for you. And you can also ask her any questions you may have directly at her email. We thank you so much for joining us today, Tracey, and taking time out of your busy schedule with your teenage boys and your dogs and everything. So I appreciate you being here. It's rare that I have someone on the West Coast because she's from Burbank, California. So usually we have someone who's really sleepy because it's really past their bedtime by the time we finish. But we're both on the West Coast. I'm still sleepy because my bedtime is 8 o'clock because I get up at 4 in the morning. So it's almost my bedtime here real soon. But we thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it, and I hope you had a great time.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a fabulous first YouTube experience. I really
Oh,
appreciate it. That was wonderful. And I've
awesome,
learned
awesome.
so much from you. So thank you. I appreciate all that you've
You're
taught me.
you're welcome. Okay, well, everybody, we have another one. I'm trying to think. We got to look at my next one. Participants, where are my thumbnails? Who's my next person? Karen Leahy we have, and she's on May 17th is our next one. It's a Saturday, so it'll be 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern on Saturday, May 17th. So join us for that if you'd like. I always forget this, so let me put it up here before I forget. Please like and subscribe so it gets out to more teachers. It really does help spread the word so everybody can get the information from all of us teachers out there. And with that, I will say goodbye, everybody. I will see you live on Tuesday, same time, same channel. And then again for our CI stories, our next one will be on May 17th. So in 2 weeks, we will talk with Karen. So with that, I'll say goodbye. Have a great week, and I'll see you next time.